Hello guys, I hope you're keeping very well. I wanted to do like, a little bit of a sort of introductory video to how we might treat a multi-track recording. If we just got the stems from an engineer, you know, they were raw, no plugins supplied, no mixing done at all, nothing's like, it's literally what came through the microphones into the desk and then into tape, or in tape meaning could be in Pro Tools, could mean Logic, could be any sort of DAW. We're going to be doing this in Logic Pro X, but these files can be applied to any DAW that you are learning in. Cambridge Music Tech are the kind of the sort of providers of the additional resources to Mike Senior's mixing secrets for the small studio book, which I would recommend anyone who's got a few pounds spare buy, because it gives you some really sort of really useful, really meaningful and hugely helpful foundations and introductions to many of the sort of terminologies and processes we use in the mixing, mastering, post-production world. So I'll link this in the description. What this website is it's basically giving us a whole bunch of multi-tracks. We are going to use a track called Get Out of Bed. It's just the first track I downloaded. I don't know why, because it's right at the bottom of the damn page. I must have just been scrolling through quick. I know how it's laid out, and for the purposes of introducing you guys to these concepts, it's just easier for me to explain. But if you did want to choose your own genre or choose something that's more meaningful to you, something you like working in, if you go right up the top here, you've got everything from hip-hop, dance, experimental, singer-songwriter, blues, country, indie, folk, reggae, orchestral. The list's on and on, goes on and on. So there's 513 projects there for you to experiment with and to get going with as well. So yeah, like I say, anything you want to get, you can either just choose the edited excerpts, which will be groups. I'd imagine will be groups, like one track would just be drums, one track would just be something else. I could be wrong there because I've never downloaded those, but that's what would make sense to me. You can get the full previews or just an excerpt. I'd get the multi-track and maybe get the final mix, just so you can try an A/B between the two, or not bother with the final mix at all. Just literally pick up the multi-track, which will be all the stems from every single recorded track, so you can play around with it. Most Macs will automatically unzip zip files. Mine doesn't, because I like to have a little bit more control over things. So we're just going to Command Q to quit Safari, and then we're going to double click here to unzip the stem files. So this is before we even go near Logic. We need to look at some file management. So the first thing I'd say when I've opened this is, you know, my heart rate is not elevated, and the reason being is that it's actually really nicely named. It's really nicely laid out. We can see here that this section here, 1 to 10, is drums. Then we've got bass. We've got electric guitars for tracks 12 through 24. There's a Hammond organ there, and then we've got vocals tracks 26 through 31. If some engineers will send you stems and they're just named with the instrument, or they're just named something that means nothing to you, and that can be a nightmare once you get into your DAW. So I would recommend actually naming your tracks now if you needed to get in here. So you can choose a track and press spacebar, and it will preview on the Mac. You can click through, see what these files actually are, and then you can name them appropriately. But like I say, this is actually laid out really nicely for us, so we can just crack straight on. Another thing I'd look at is your README file, which tells us that the tempo of the session is 128 BPM. We've got 31 WAV files, and they're at 24:44:1. So if it says there should be 31 and you haven't got 31, that's also a problem. Most engineers will put some sort of README file in their stems to let you know what's going on, like a total count. It's just a way that we can make sure we're not missing files and we've got the complete session. So let's throw my headphones on. From here, I'm happy that they're named well. I'm understanding what the BPM is. I know that there's 31 WAV files in there. I've got everything I need. I'm going to open up Logic. We're going to go File. We're going to go New, or you can choose Shift, Command and N. Whichever route you want to take will get you there. Logic likes you to start with a track of some description, so let's just choose an audio file with no input. We're going to create it. We can then Command and Tab to go back to Finder. Choose our first file, so it's highlighted. Choose Shift, and then choose our final file, which is our track 31. Let go of Shift, and that's just nicely chosen all of our stems, so we can drag them into Logic. Now, I like to start everything when I'm doing this from bar 3. The reason being that when you get down the session later on, if you've got a whole bunch of plugins that look ahead, or loads of processing, or maybe some MIDI stuff and some sample libraries need to kick in and load into the system, it just gives the computer a couple of bars to kind of get ready for that. If you start straight from bar 1, it can cause your system to sort of crash, or not to load properly, or just artifacts in terms of computer processing coming into the mix, which we just do not want. So I always start from the 3rd bar. We want to create new tracks. We do not want to place them all on one track, because that will just be crazy town. So we want to create new tracks, hit OK. This can take a little bit of time, guys, because not only is it creating those 31 tracks, it's also analysing each stem to make sure that we've got the the audio and that the system can hear it. So as you can see, it's drawing the information as I'm talking to you guys now. You do get a bit of a process bar at the top here as well as it's doing that. One thing I've forgotten, which if we jump back Command Tab to our Finder window, I have not set the BPM yet. So we need to set the tempo to 128 BPM, which we can do up here. So I'll double click in there, 128, hit enter. And that will just adjust our audio regions to be in the correct tempo. Interestingly, like I was saying about leaving 2 bars before it starts, it looks like the engineer has already done that, because if I go and press play from my bar 3, which would be his bar 1, that's 1, that's 2. Cool, so we got sound. And yeah, that's just interesting that he'd used that same thing as I did there. Clearly, we come from the same school of thought. So yeah, as you can see, it's named the tracks the same as what was in our Finder window. So if we hit X to bring up our mixer, at the bottom of the page here, you can see that it's pretty meaningful, and it's what we expected from when we were previewing the files just in Finder on their own. Let's get rid of this audio track at the top here, because we just don't want it. It's what I created when the session was first there, so we'll click on it and hit backspace. Perfect. So the first thing I might do is start colouring this. So in the same way in the Finder window, we were choosing our first file, we were holding Shift, and then we were kind of going to the bottom, or we were going to the middle to choose whichever files you wanted. It's going to be a very similar thing here. So let's choose kick 1, hold Shift, and if you hover on these files, it will tell you the full name of what they are. So tambourine is part of percussion. I'm going to put it in my drums. So that's now selected from track 1 to track 10, which is basically all of our percussion. If we now go onto view and we say show colors, this will give us our color palette, and then you can start actually choosing what you want these tracks to be colored. So if I choose red, for drums seem red to me. Let's do the same thing here. So we can literally just click and drag down, choose our 10, and then why not make them red? Let's do the same thing for the bass. So let's go there. The key command, by the way, is Alt and C. I just did there. Let's make the bass sort of orange, right? Let's click on the track and let's go orange. Guitars, what are we feeling for guitars? So I'm going to click the first track, hold Shift. Our guitars go up to all the way up to the Hammond, I believe. Let's hover Hammond, electric guitars, yep, so we'll choose those ones. Just holding Shift from the first track to the end track. Let's do the guitars in green. Hammond, let's give it its own, let's do the Hammond yellow. Oh, hang about, I didn't do my guitars, did I? Guitars, we wanted them green. Our Hammond was a yellow. Right, Vox, now, it's up to you. You could colour them all the same, or you could look. So we got what we got here: lead vocals, backing vocals, probably 4 tracks of backing. Personally, I treat my lead and my backing differently. So let's come in, let's do like a purple for the lead. Let's go there again and choose purple. And then backing, let's do the backing vocals as like a, let's go in and do them pink, why not? And I like to do my master as well in like a reddy colour. Just makes sense to me. So now when I'm looking at the session, I can see pretty much what's going on. It's just given me a visual representation of what is a drum, what is a bass, what is a guitar, what is an organ, what is a vocal, and that's represented in the bottom here as well, right? So from here, I would then start grouping things. So straight away, this is someone else's session. This is just how I'm approaching something that is meaningful to me, and I hope it's also meaningful to you. So the first thing I want to do is start my first gain stage. And what I mean by gain stage is that I want to be able to control the volume of, say, all my drums, all my guitars, all my vocals from one fader, because we're going to have a mix happening on the drums here in this section at the bottom here. These first 10 tracks will eventually have some balancing, but I might want to knock the volume of all those tracks up or all those tracks down, and we do that through what's known as a VCA, or a voltage controlled amplifier, which is a term that goes all the way back to early desks, and it was only high-end desks back in the day that had this sort of routing capability. Now it's pretty much standard. So we're going to do the same thing, right, as we've just done with the colours. We're going to choose the first track, we're going to choose shift, we're going to go all the way to the tambourine, we're going to right click, and then we're going to say we want to create a new VCA. Now, if you don't see VCA here pop up, what you need to do is go to View, you need to go to Channel Strip Components, and make sure that it's ticked on. Sometimes Logic by default does not have it turned on, so make sure that you've got it on at this stage now, or everything I'm saying is not going to make any sense. Logic always creates like auxiliary tracks, which is kind of what this is. Not really, it is a VCA, but you could see it as an auxiliary track as well at the end of the session. First thing I want to do is double click in there, and I'm going to call it drums, and I'm going to make it nice and big, drums, and that is named the VCA over here as well with the corresponding name. But I don't really want the VCA to sit at the end of the session like that. It's just not. I'd have buses, I'd have auxiliaries at the back there, so I could then have another gain stage, but that's kind of a little bit out of the scope of this video. So we're going to right click on them, and we're going to say create track, which will throw the VCA right at the very end of the session. Sorry, right at the end of the drum stems, and no longer at the end of the session. So straight away, the first thing I can do now, which is useful, is I can hit solo. And what that is going to do is literally just solo everything that's in this VCA. Same for mute. If you wanted to suddenly take the drums out in the middle of the session, you can do that now. So let's just get a basic mix on these drums. Something like that. A lot of ring on that snare. I'm sure some of you might want to tidy it up straight away, but whatever. So what we've got here is we've done a little bit of sort of balancing in terms of the faders here. But what if I wanted to actually add some volume to all those tracks, or take some volume away and attenuate it, without having to like choose every fader and bring them all down? Now you could create a group, so you could go one there, hold shift, create the end track, and then group it. So you could come to this group section and go in here and go new group. And now when I move one fader, it'll move all the faders. I personally just prefer to use a VCA, so I'm gonna say no group. But that would provide the same functionality, but I find it messy and I make mistakes when I do that. Groups is something I'll tend to do when I break these down into smaller food groups at the end of the session, but again, that's in another video, guys. So right now, if I just play my drums, there's no risk of me sort of accidentally turning up a whole section if by the groups being off. If the groups are on and you move one slider all the way down or all the way up, you're going to affect the whole section, and sometimes you can do that without meaning to. So to me, this is a safer way of you controlling the volume, you muting and you soloing a section, and it just gives you your first, probably your second gain stage, because I suppose your first gain stage is actually the fader itself on the individual stem. But this here would be, you know, your first subgroup, if you like, your first gain stage in terms of a subgroup. You can also come up here, and if you hit A, you can start drawing in some automation. You'll notice that you can't put any plugins on here, so you can't do any bus compression, you can't do any bus EQ. That would be through an auxiliary track. What I would do once I'd done all my VCAs is I'd literally create outputs. So I'd send, as opposed to sending everything to stereo out, I'd send them to an individual bus, and then they'd go to the end of the session, and that would be like final drums. And from there, I could start adding different parts of compression. But again, that is outside the scope of this video. So I'm going to leave the bass on its own because it's just one bass track. But let's do the same for the guitars. Let's just choose all the guitars here. We're going to right click. We're going to say create new VCA. It's going to come to the end of the session. Let's call it guitars. Then we're going to right click on it. And remember, we're going to say create track, which is going to put the VCA for the guitars at the end of the session. So now if I start moving all this around, first thing I can do is solo the guitars. There is going to be some sort of double takes there, and so there'll be some panning that we probably would need to do. So we got electric guitar 1, electric guitar direct input or DI, electric guitar 2. So you'd need to analyze this, but just from looking at the sessions here, these are the same. So I go 1 left, the DI center maybe, and then the guitar 2 right. Let's see what it sounds like. Let's just bring the drums in as well so we can solo them. And we ignored the bass, how dare we? So yeah, we've left the bass on its own because there's just one direct input bass, one DI bass. But with a rock song, I'd kind of start balancing the drums and the bass. The number one thing that you're going to want to do, this unsolo the guitars, is pretty much with a bass guitar, you're going to want to add a compressor. So let's go ahead and do that. We soloed out our bass and we soloed out our drums. So let's just throw on a compressor now so we can actually start to you know, get a little bit of volume into our bass and control that dynamic range. The good thing with Logic is it gives you a whole bunch of different presets and a whole bunch of different options. So even if you don't fully understand at this moment in time what the compressor does in terms of all these knobs and buttons, you can play around with it yourself by loading a preset and then seeing what that does. So if I just go guitars and choose like bass heavy, you know, it's set the ratio really high. Sorry, set the threshold at -20. Let's see what that actually sounds like. Needs to be lower. So if you don't get anything happening in terms of the compressor, you probably need to move the threshold down, because that's the thing that's telling the compressor when it wants to kick in, what frequency it wants to kick in. Your ratio is basically how much compression that you've got that you want to use. Makeup is kind of volume, so if you want to add more volume or remove more volume, really with compression you should get your volume. You should actually bring your volume down so that you're actually matching the volume to the same as it was before it was compressed. But at this stage, just play around with this so it sounds good. You know, attack is like, when is this going to be kicking in? How much of the sound are we going to hear before the compressor starts to attenuate frequencies and bring things down, or vice versa. The release, how long are we holding the compression for? So if I play this, if I go on graph, so the release is how long before that line goes back up. You can hear it's always laboured a bit. If I bring it down, so the shorter the release is, the quicker that the compressor is going to let go of the sound. The longer the release is, the longer it's going to hold the sound. So if I go really high there, see, it's more sort of fluid. It's more sort of a sort of what's the word I'm looking for? The line, there's not much fluctuation in that line. If I bring this down, so that's kind of what your release is doing. So, but you can play around with this. Like if you load up another one, say you go guitars and you go bass light. Let's see what this one does. Let's go back to meter a sec. So nothing's happening. Need to bring our threshold down. Sounds nice to me. Let's bring the drums in. Sorry, that was just the tambourine. I want the whole drums, please. Bring the guitars in. Sounding wild. A lot of guitars there. So let's go back to a little bit of I know we've jumped out a little bit here. Let's jump back in and do a little bit more in terms of VCAs. So I do a VCA for the lead vocals. Choose the two. Right click. Create new VCA. We'll call this Vox L. Right click, and we're going to say we want to create the track. Then we're going to choose the first one there, which is now track 28. And we're going to go all the way to 31. Create new VCA. Vox. Oh, need to double click on it. Vox B. Right click. Create track. So another thing the VCA does is it breaks up the session. So not only have you got it coloured, obviously we haven't got a VCA for the bass because it's just one track. If there was more than one track, I would have. But it gives us a nice visual break in the session, so to speak, with what's going on in the session. So you can now play around. So say, for instance, if you played the whole session again and we wanted to balance the vocals a bit. So you can see that, you know, the bass is really loud, the drums are really loud. Well, we got some compression on the bass, and the live sound that's been kind of chosen for the drums is pretty good. It does need some EQ, which you can start doing, guys. Just double click in the EQ window here, and it'll bring this up. And again, just use the defaults. If you're learning, go into drums, like what we got here, kick drum. So there'll probably be something in here just for kick drums. Low end kick. What's that doing? Never understand why they put these in here. I suppose it's for a kit that a kit that's got spill, but you know, most of the time kick is going to be sort of 200 and down. Let's double click again. Let's double click in here. Let's add something to that. We're just going to do the kick and the snare because you can play around with this on your own. So let's go refresh snare. Double click in there. Drums. Let's go refresh snare again, why not? Sounds much better on the snare. But anyway, let's come out of here. Okay, so let's... So let's just do another bit of EQ. Let's double click in this main vocal. We can literally just choose a voice. What should we do? Bright vocal. Get out of bed. So that's not really done a lot. All that's done is cut the lows, and this is a female voice. So it's not really made much difference. So let's jump in. Let's go female Vox 1. That's a bit more meaningful. Someone's coming up the stairs. I played it. Yeah, there's some stuff in there you could get rid of, but let's just, for now, let's roll with that because it's making the most difference to my ears. And we're going to want to add a compressor because it's a vocal line and she's pretty unruly. So let's try and control those dynamic ranges in the voice. So we're just going to go voice. Let's just choose something like on top vocal, just be a general sort of a general bit of compression. Let's see what it's sounding like. I played it. I'm going to mute the other vocal. So we're just going to take the VCA off. We're going to solo just one vocal line. I played it. I played it. Now again, nothing's happening because the threshold's too high. Dead. Hear mum screaming off her head. Get out of bed. Get out. I don't like that at all. So we'll just come in and change it to something else. Studio vocal, say. I played it. I played it. Hear mum screaming off her head. Get out of bed. Get out of bed. Someone's coming up the stairs. I played it. I played it. Sounds better to me. So let's put her in context. This unsolo her. Get out of bed. Get out of bed. Someone's coming up. So now the bass is really loud. Let's bring that down. So again, you can see these compressors just by making those quieter parts louder and the louder parts quieter. So you're reducing the performance, but you're starting to be able to control the dynamics of that section. She needs a bit of reverb. So we're going to come down here again. Let's choose a silver verb. These guys, by the way, probably won't be on your session. This is like recent stuff that I've used. So if you come down into the reverb section, just choose like a silver verb, say. Let's just go for a mono silver verb. And let's just chuck in like a... In fact, let's not use a silver verb. Let's go for a space designer. Let's go out of space designer. Let's go back in, reverb, space designer, mono. And let's just choose like a small space, room. Multi-vocals will do. Probably be a little bit too many nodes, but let's try it. So way too wet. Hear mum screaming off her head. Get out of bed. Get out of bed. Someone's coming up the stairs. I played it. I played it. Let's copy that space designer. So we're just going to hold control. And we're going to drag the space designer over to... Oh no, that's moved it. I wanted to copy it. So... Just Control Alt together. And you can drag your space designer over. I'm actually going to copy all of these over. Just so you get a starting point that's similar. Let's see what they're sounding like now with both those vocal stems in. I played it! let's do the same as well. Let's copy over the compression. This is going to be totally different, guys. So I do recommend doing this to a point because it gives you a good starting point, but you would change the settings and you change the parameters for each one of these. You wouldn't just set one EQ or one compression for the entire session. You go into each one of these and you make it more meaningful. So already the backing vocals are probably going to need the threshold way more down, stuff like that. But I just wanted to show you some of the plugins you may use at this standpoint, at this point in the session.
Get out of bed, get out of bed. I can't find school
And just give you some volume off the bat.
if I want. I play dead, I play dead. Mom says get out of bed, get out of bed, get out of bed. I want my breakfast in my bed. I play dead, I play dead.
That sounds terrible. You got to look at this for phasing as well, guys. I was just trying to give a little bit of a lot of stuff in the minute, is because there's not much panning. A lot of it's very sort of mono.
I play dead, just don't wanna get out of bed. I play dead, and I play dead.
We've got to check out that Hammond.
I play dead, just don't wanna get out of bed. I play dead.
So that's where you'd need to start doing some serious balancing between that Hammond and the guitars, because there's lots of interference, and you do that through panning, or you do that a lot through a lot of compression, a lot of EQ, to get more control over those guitars, because they're very, very unruly. Play around with it, guys. I hope that was useful as like an intro to how to deal with a multi-track session. There's a lot to it, and it does not end there by any means, but I don't want to fill your heads with too much information right now. I just thought that would be a way of kind of giving you a bit of a clearer idea of how you might deal with a multi-track session, and not just throw a bunch of stems into Logic and think, what the hell am I doing with this session? So yeah, take care of yourself, guys. Have fun. Download any of those sessions you want and start playing around with them, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace out.